Hi everyone, happy Monday. I'm Dr. Trina Hinkley from the Expanded Self. It is bloody freezing here in Melbourne today, so if you're listening from somewhere else, I hope that you're a little bit warmer than we are in Melbourne. Cold and wintry and dark and grey. But that's okay because it's winter after all. It's quite nice to be inside and warm. So maybe you're feeling a little overwhelmed at the moment, given everything that's going on with the virus in our community. And maybe you're wondering how you're going to recover or how you're going to just manage and find your way through the rest of this challenging time. Or maybe you're not actually feeling affected by it at all. And how you're feeling might be influenced by how resilient you are. So resilience is something that's been around a lot lately, unsurprisingly. So I am covering that in my blogs this week and next week and just chatting a little bit about it in each of these videos to unpack it a little bit and find out what it is and why it's useful, and then have a bit of a look next week about where we might find resilience in our lives, what might support us, and how we can cultivate some more of it if we think it's something that we'd like to have a little bit more of. So I did a bit of a deep dive into the literature. So this isn't an area that I've spent a lot of time in before. My research has been mostly around psychosocial well-being, and resilience is a construct that's closely related to that, but separate as well. So I really wanted to understand it a little bit more. And it seems that although there's heaps of literature on it, like hundreds of thousands of hits in the academic databases, nobody seems to really agree on exactly what it is. And we often find this with terms like well-being and resilience. People seem to have their own take on it. But what does seem to be consistent is that across definitions, there are these two concepts that seem to be fairly consistent. So they're the concepts of adversity and positive adaptation. So I wanted to talk a little bit about those. I dug into them a little bit for my own understanding, and I thought might be useful to share with everyone as well. So adversity is within the situation that you find yourself in. So it's a term that we use a lot. People probably have a fairly good understanding of it. It can be thought of as a challenging life situation, and this isn't necessarily a bad situation. Because challenge can come from situations that we choose, like changing a job or moving house. So there can be considered to be adversity in some of those situations as well. So basically, it's a situation where we could potentially have some negative outcomes. So things like we could have poorer physical health or poorer mental health or experience financial problems. So those things can result from any number of situations. So basically, adversity is the context that you find yourself in that resilience might make itself known. So at the moment, an adversity that many of us are facing is physical isolation from people that we care about. So the other concept in a lot of the definitions was positive adaptation, and that pretty much is what it sounds like. It's how do we find ways to change, manage, grow that give us positive outcomes in a situation that might be considered challenging. So that's our ability to be able to adapt in an adverse circumstance in such a way that we have favourable outcomes. So think, for instance, about starting a new job can be quite challenging, could be considered an adverse situation. You're in an environment you're unfamiliar with, talking with people that you don't really know, and you might not really have a clear idea of what you're actually expected to do in your job or what your boundaries are. So that's the adverse circumstance. Your positive adaptation is how do you manage that? What are the strategies that you put in place to cope with that? So for instance, you might get a new notebook and you might make lots of notes in your notebook, as I tend to do when I start a new job. Write down lots of things that people tell me and then generally don't look at it again. But the very act of writing helps to embed it. And then I do have the notes there if I want to go back on them. So that sort of shows that you're resourceful and you're adaptable and you're willing to take responsibility for yourself. So these are, characteristics of being resilient that we might consider important. Another example might be the current COVID-19 restrictions where we're physically isolated from the people that we care about. Even now in Australia, when we have relaxation of a lot of the restrictions, we're still under instruction to keep 1.5 metres away from people. So we're still, not supposed to be experiencing close physical contact with people who we might otherwise give a hug to or receive a hug from. And this might be a particularly challenging time for families who have children at home, everybody under the one roof. If parents are trying to work from home and children are at home, and parents are trying to homeschool children and support children while also looking after themselves, they might find themselves in financial distress or emotionally, psychologically challenged. Could be very, very challenging situation for many families. So the suggestion in the literature around this time is that this might actually be an opportunity, if we can harness some of that positive adaptation and resilience, might be an opportunity for children to learn things like emotional regulation, where they learn how to better control or manage their emotions, and also for families to find unique and interesting ways to actually bond together to resolve the challenges that you face typically when you spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in very close proximity with the same people. Can be very challenging. So that's just a little insight into what resilience is. So it's the use of positive adaptation in adverse circumstances to promote favourable outcomes and to minimise some of the adverse outcomes that we might otherwise see, which might include, as I mentioned, poor physical or mental health or financial stress. So what I've got is, to sum up resilience, basically, at those times when life gives you lemons, adversity, you're able to find your way through to get to the other side, avoiding at least some of the hazards and maybe even growing a bit in the process, which is positive adaptation. A little bit corny, but there you go, probably an easy way for us to remember it. So if you're feeling that you'd like some support at this time, please feel free to reach out to me. I am available to support members of the community, and I would love to connect with you. You can private message me or connect with me on my website at theexpandedself.life. I'll pop the web address in the link as well. And I'll pop back on Wednesday and I'll chat a little bit more about resilience then and what some of the benefits of being resilient might be. And then Friday I have a nice little meditation around fostering resilience in our lives. Hope you have a great week. Hope you stay cozy and warm, and I'll see you in a couple of days. Bye.